The transport ship dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a shudder that Jake Morrison felt in his bones. Through the viewport, he saw it for the first time. Kepler 7 station hung in the darkness of space like a massive wheel, slowly rotating to create artificial gravity. Lights dotted its surface, and ships from a dozen different worlds clustered around its docking ports. This was the Intergalactic Combat Training Institute, and Jake was about to become one of its newest students. He pressed his hand against the cold glass and watched as the station grew larger. Back on Earth, they had told him he was representing all of humanity. No pressure, they had said with nervous laughs. Just go to an alien military academy and try not to embarrass the entire human race. Jake had been a decent soldier in the Marine Corps, good enough to be selected for this program. But decent on Earth might not mean much out here among species that had been traveling the stars for thousands of years. The docking procedure took 20 minutes. When the airlock finally opened, Jake grabbed his duffel bag and stepped into a corridor that curved upward in both directions. The artificial gravity felt slightly heavier than Earth normal. His boots clicked against the metal floor as he followed the glowing signs that he hoped said, "New student registration," in the dozen alien languages displayed. Other cadets filled the hallway. Jake saw his first live alien, a creature that looked like a praying mantis the size of a human, with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the overhead lights. It wore some kind of uniform with symbols he did not recognize. The creature glanced at him and made a clicking sound that might have been laughter before moving on. A floating drone approached him, scanning his face with a blue light. "Cadet Jake Morrison, human, Earth origin," it said in perfect English. "Follow the yellow line to processing area 7. A glowing yellow strip appeared on the floor at his feet. Jake followed it through 3 more corridors until he reached a large open area filled with aliens of every shape and size imaginable. Some looked almost human. Others were so strange that Jake had trouble figuring out which end was the head. He saw beings made of what looked like living crystal, creatures covered in scales, and one that seemed to be floating in a tank of liquid being pushed on a cart. They all wore variations of the same uniform, a dark blue material that somehow fit every body type. "Human," a deep voice rumbled. Jake turned and looked up at a creature that towered 9 feet tall. Its body was covered in dark red scales, with a head that reminded Jake of the dinosaurs he had seen in museums as a kid. Yellow eyes with vertical pupils stared down at him. "I am Chief Instructor Zalthor. You are the Earth representative for this training cycle." Jake straightened and gave a salute that probably meant nothing to this alien. "Yes, sir." Jake Morrison reporting for duty. Zalthor's mouth opened slightly, showing teeth designed for tearing meat. It might have been a smile. "We do not salute here, human. We acknowledge skill and strength through combat performance. Your species is new to the galactic community. Most of my students question why you were invited at all. I'll do my best to show them, sir," Jake said, keeping his voice steady even though his heart was hammering. "See that you do. Report to Dormitory Section 12, Room 47. Your bunkmate is already there. Training begins at dawn cycle station time." Zalthor turned and walked away, his tail swishing behind him. Jake found his room after getting lost twice. The door slid open to reveal a space about the size of a college dorm room, with 2 sleeping platforms, 2 desks, and what he hoped was a bathroom behind another door. Sitting at one desk was the mantis-like creature he had seen in the hallway. "You are the human," it said without turning around. Its voice came from somewhere in its thorax and sounded like wind chimes. "I am Clix of the Vrex Hive Worlds. I requested a different roommate, but my request was denied." Jake set his bag on the empty sleeping platform. "Nice to meet you too." Clix finally turned to face him. "Do not take offense. It is simply fact. Humans have no combat adaptations. No natural weapons, no armor plating, no venom, no enhanced senses. Your species survived on your world through luck and numbers. Here you will be trained in modern combat techniques using advanced technology. But I wonder if you can keep pace." "I guess we'll find out," Jake said. He started unpacking his gear, trying to ignore the way Clix watched his every move with those huge compound eyes. The first week was harder than anything Jake had experienced in basic training back on Earth. The academy pushed every cadet to their limits and beyond. Morning started with physical conditioning in a gravity chamber that could simulate any environment. Jake struggled through exercises that left him gasping, while aliens with extra lungs barely breathed hard. Combat drills lasted for hours, teaching them to use weapons that Jake had only seen in science fiction movies. energy rifles that fired bolts of superheated plasma. Blades made from a single molecule stretched to sword length, sharp enough to cut through steel like paper. Gauntlets that could generate kinetic force to punch through armor. Grenades that created miniature gravity wells. Jake learned to handle all of them, but he was always the slowest, always the one who needed extra help. The other cadets noticed. In the mess hall, Jake often ate alone. When instructors formed teams for exercises, he was always picked last. He heard whispers in languages he did not understand, but the mocking tone was universal. The soft-skinned human, the primitive, the weak link. Only Click showed him any attention, and that was mostly curiosity mixed with pity. Your species only achieved faster than light travel 30 of your years ago, Click said one evening as they studied in their room. My people have traveled the stars for 8,000 years. The Thorians for 12,000. You are children playing at war. Jake looked up from his manual on plasma rifle maintenance. Maybe, but we're fast learners. Fast enough to survive here? I wonder. Clix returned to his own studies, mandibles clicking softly. The training covered everything from hand-to-hand combat to fleet tactics. Jake absorbed it all, taking notes late into the night while Clix's side of the room went dark. He studied the strengths and weaknesses of different species. The Thorians could manipulate plasma naturally but overheated easily. The Zanari had telepathic abilities but were physically fragile. The Draconis like Zalthor were incredibly strong but slow compared to smaller species. And humans? Humans were average at everything. Not the strongest, not the fastest, not the smartest. Just somewhere in the middle with no special abilities at all. Jake started to understand why the other cadets dismissed his species. What did humanity bring to the galactic table? During a weapons training session, Jake finally scored a hit on the moving targets that had been eluding him all week. It was not the fastest time or the most accurate shooting, but it was progress. Instructor Zalthor nodded slightly as Jake's score appeared on the board. Adequate, Zalthor said. You learn slowly, human, but you do learn. Perhaps there is hope for your kind after all. It was not much of a compliment, but Jake held on to it. He continued training, pushing through the exhaustion and the self-doubt. Every morning he got up and tried again. Every evening he went to bed covered in bruises and burns from training accidents. Slowly, almost without noticing, he started to improve. 3 weeks into the training cycle, Jake was eating lunch when he overheard a conversation at the next table. A group of senior cadets were discussing something called the Mid-Cycle Combat Tournament. He listened carefully while pretending to focus on his food. I plan to enter, a Thorian named Zeph was saying. His skin flickered with barely contained plasma energy. The warrior's commendation would guarantee my placement in the elite tactical program. You will have competition, another cadet replied. I heard that Commander Selra herself might oversee the matches this cycle. Jake's translator implant caught most of the conversation. A tournament. A way to prove yourself. He made a mental note to ask about it later. That night, Jake lay on his sleeping platform staring at the ceiling. Clix was already asleep, making a soft humming sound that must have been Vrex snoring. Jake thought about home, about Earth hanging in space so far away. He thought about all the people counting on him to represent humanity well. I won't let you down, he whispered to the empty air. Outside the window, stars wheeled slowly past as the station rotated. Somewhere out there were thousands of alien civilizations, each with their own warriors and heroes. And here was Jake Morrison, one ordinary human trying to find his place among them. He did not know it yet, but everything was about to change. In just a few days, Zalthor would make an announcement that would give Jake an opportunity. Not to match the aliens at their own game, but to remind the galaxy that humans had been waging war long before they ever reached the stars. Jake closed his eyes and drifted off to sleep, dreaming of home and hoping that tomorrow would bring a chance to prove that humanity belonged here after all. The morning alarm pulled Jake from sleep at what his body still insisted was 3 a.m. Station time meant nothing to his internal clock, but he dragged himself out of bed anyway. Clix was already up and performing some kind of stretching, routine that involved positions no human spine could manage. Jake stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on his face. Today was different. He could feel it in the air as he walked to the main training hall. Other cadets moved with extra energy, talking in excited clusters. Something was happening. Jake found a spot near the back of the assembly area as more students filed in. The hall could hold 500 beings, and it looked like every cadet in the academy was present. Chief Instructor Zalthor entered through the main doors, and the room fell silent. His scales gleamed under the overhead lights as he walked to the raised platform at the front. Behind him came other instructors, representatives from a dozen species, all of them wearing the medals and scars of veteran warriors. Cadets. Zalthor's voice boomed across the hall without any need for amplification. We gather today to announce the mid-cycle combat tournament, a tradition maintained for 300 generations of warriors. Excited murmurs rippled through the crowd. Jake saw cadets nudging each other, grins and expressions of determination on faces both human-like and alien. Zalthor continued. This tournament tests not only your combat skills but your tactical thinking, your adaptability, and your warrior spirit. You will face opponents one-on-one in the arena. Victory brings honor to yourself and your species. The ultimate winner receives the warrior's commendation and automatic advancement to elite tactical training. Jake felt his pulse quicken. This was it. This was the chance he had been hoping for. A way to prove that humans belonged here, that they were more than just the new kids stumbling around in the galactic playground. The rules are simple, Zalthor said. He gestured and a holographic display appeared in the air above him, showing various weapons. You may use any approved weapon from the Academy Armory. Energy rifles, plasma blades, kinetic gauntlets, force staves, monomolecular blades, gravity hammers, all are permitted. The display shifted, showing crossed-out images of different weapon types. Jake leaned forward, studying them carefully. However, Zalthor's voice took on a hard edge. No projectile weapons are allowed. We are warriors of the modern age, not primitive hunters. Chemical propellant weapons, railguns, coil guns, compressed gas launchers, all such crude technology is forbidden. These are relics of barbaric times, inefficient compared to directed energy systems. Any cadet found using projectile weapons will be disqualified immediately. Jake's mind raced. Projectile weapons. He thought about the rifles he had trained with in the Marines, the pistols, the machine guns. All banned here. The aliens considered them primitive, beneath notice. A cadet near the front raised a limb. Instructor Zalthor, what exactly defines a projectile weapon? Zalthor nodded as if expecting the question. Any weapon that uses chemical explosives to propel ammunition. Any weapon that uses electromagnetic fields to accelerate projectiles. Any weapon that uses compressed gas or air pressure to fire objects. These are the marks of primitive warfare. We have evolved beyond such crude methods. Jake raised his hand. Zalthor's yellow eyes found him in the crowd. The human has a question? Sir, just to be clear, anything that fires a physical object using those methods is banned? Jake asked. Correct. Modern weapons use directed energy or manipulate matter at the molecular level. They are precise, powerful, and elegant. Throwing metal slugs at your enemy is the method of species that have not yet mastered basic physics. Zalthor's tone made it clear what he thought of such weapons. The tournament will begin in 4 weeks. Registration opens tomorrow. Train hard, cadets. Glory awaits those with the skill to claim it. The assembly dispersed in a wave of conversation. Jake walked back to his room in a daze, his mind turning over what he had heard. Clix caught up with him in the corridor. You are thinking of entering the tournament, Clix said. It was not a question. Maybe, Jake replied. Do not embarrass yourself, human. You have trained for only 3 weeks. Other cadets have trained their entire lives. Some species are born warriors, you are born soft and slow. Clix's tone was not cruel, just matter of fact. I do not wish to see you injured needlessly. I appreciate the concern, Jake said, but I have to try. Back in their room, Jake sat at his desk and pulled up his personal communication terminal. It took several minutes to establish a secure connection back to Earth. The lag was noticeable, even with faster-than-light communications. Finally, a face appeared on the screen. Colonel Lisa Grant had been Jake's commanding officer before his selection for the Academy program. She was in her 50s with gray streaking through her short hair and eyes that had seen combat on 3 continents. She smiled when she saw him. "Jake, good to see you. How's life among the aliens?" "Challenging, ma'am," Jake said. He quickly explained the tournament and the rules. "They've banned projectile weapons, called them primitive and crude." Lisa's smile widened. "Did they now? And how exactly did they define projectile weapons?" "Chemical propellants, electromagnetic acceleration, compressed gas, anything that uses those methods to fire ammunition." Lisa laughed, a sound that made Jake feel homesick for Earth. "Jake, do you remember anything from your military history courses?" "Some," he admitted. "Before we had gunpowder, before we had chemistry and electromagnets and pneumatics, how did humans wage war?" Jake thought about it. His mind went back to history class, to museums, to documentaries he had watched as a kid. Swords, spears, bows and arrows. "And what makes a bow work?" Lisa asked. The answer came to him slowly. "Mechanical energy. You pull the string back, store energy in the bent limbs, then release it." "Exactly. No chemistry, no electromagnets, no compressed gas, just physics and mechanics. Potential energy converted to kinetic energy." Lisa's expression turned thoughtful. "These aliens think projectile weapons are primitive because they're thinking of guns. But humans were launching projectiles at each other for tens of thousands of years before we invented gunpowder." Jake felt something stirring in his chest. An idea, still forming. The rules technically would allow anything that does not use those specific technologies. "They would," Lisa agreed. "Jake, humanity's greatest weapon has never been our strength or our speed. It's been our ability to think sideways, to find solutions nobody else considered. These aliens have forgotten that lesson because they've been using energy weapons for so long." "I need to do some research," Jake said. "I'll send you some files. Historical documents, technical specifications, instructional videos, everything I can find." Lisa's smile was almost predatory now. "Show them what a primitive human can do." The connection ended. Jake sat in the dark for a long moment, then pulled up the Academy's historical database. He started searching for information on human warfare before the age of gunpowder. The database was extensive, containing records from thousands of species across millions of years. Humanity's contribution was small by comparison, but it was there. He found entries on medieval European warfare, Asian martial traditions, ancient Roman military tactics, African tribal combat, and weapons. So many weapons that humanity had invented before they ever split the atom or left their planet. Swords, spears, axes, clubs, slings, javelins, and bows. Long bows, short bows, composite bows, recurve bows. Humans had been perfecting the art of the bow for over 60,000 years. But there was another weapon that caught Jake's eye. Something that combined the power of a bow with mechanical advantage, the crossbow. Medieval soldiers had used them to devastating effect. They required less training than traditional bows but could punch through the best armor of their age. And they worked on purely mechanical principles. Bend the limbs using a mechanical crank, store the energy, pull a trigger to release it. No chemistry, no compressed gas, no electromagnets. Just physics that any first-year engineering student could understand. Jake spent the next 3 hours reading everything he could find about crossbows. Their history, their design, their effectiveness. The files Lisa sent arrived and he devoured those too. Detailed schematics, draw weights and bolt velocities, penetration tests against various armor types. Clicks returned to the room and found Jake surrounded by holographic displays of ancient human weapons. The Vrek studied the images with his compound eyes. "What is this?" Clicks asked. "Research," Jake said. "Tell me something, Clicks. Have you ever seen a crossbow?" "I do not know this word." "That's what I thought." Jake pulled up an image of a medieval crossbow. "This is technology from Earth from about 1,000 years ago, before we had any kind of modern science." Clicks examined the image. "It appears to launch projectiles." "It does. But it does not use gunpowder or electromagnets or compressed gas. It uses tension and bent materials. Pure mechanical energy." Jake looked at his roommate. "Would this violate the tournament rules?" Clicks was quiet for a long moment. his mandibles clicking softly. I do not believe so. By the technical definition, provided by Instructor Zalthor, this would not qualify as a forbidden projectile weapon. But Jake, this is ancient technology. Surely it cannot compete with modern weapons. The morning of the tournament arrived with Jake waking before his alarm. His stomach was twisted in knots, but his hands were steady as he went through his morning routine. Clix was already awake, performing pre-combat meditation that involved standing perfectly still for long minutes. The Vrex had advanced to the tournament as well, one of 48 cadets selected from the hundreds at the academy. Jake ate a light breakfast in the mess hall, forcing food down despite his nerves. Around him, other tournament competitors sat in small groups. Some were silent and focused. Others talked loudly, boasting about how they would dominate their matches. A few glanced at Jake with expressions he had learned to read as pity or amusement. The human was in over his head, their looks said. He would be eliminated in the first round. Good, Jake thought. Let them underestimate me. The tournament was being held in the Academy's main combat arena, a massive space that could be reconfigured for different types of battles. Jake had been there for training exercises, but never for an event like this. When he entered through the competitor's tunnel, the scale of it hit him. The arena floor was the size of a football field, with a hard metal surface marked with glowing boundary lines. Above it, rising in tiers, were seats for thousands of spectators. And they were full. Cadets, instructors, visiting dignitaries from across the galaxy, all packed into the stands. Holographic displays floated in the air, showing the tournament bracket and real-time statistics. Jake found his name near the bottom of the bracket, seeded 48th out of 48. The absolute lowest ranking. His first opponent was listed as Vorn of the Kragnoth species. Jake had sparred with him once during training, and come away with bruises that had taken 3 days to heal. Vorn was nearly 8 feet tall and probably weighed 500 pounds, most of it muscle wrapped in natural armor plating. He fought using a powered exoskeleton that enhanced his already massive strength and a force hammer that could shatter concrete. Jake carried his wrapped crossbow to the competitor's staging area. Other fighters stared at the long bundle, trying to guess what weapon it concealed. A Thorian cadet named Zeph approached, his skin flickering with barely contained plasma. "Human Jake," Zeph said in his hissing voice. "I hope your first match is honorable. Vorn is a powerful opponent." "Thanks," Jake said. "Good luck in your match, too." Zeph's expression was hard to read on his alien features, but Jake thought he detected something like respect. At least this one was not actively mocking him. The opening ceremony began with Chief Instructor Zalthor entering the arena floor. His scales gleamed under the bright lights as he addressed the crowd. "Today we witness the mid-cycle combat tournament. These cadets will demonstrate the skills they have learned, the warrior spirit they carry, and the honor of their species. Let the matches begin." The crowd erupted in cheers, roars, clicks, and sounds Jake had no names for. The first match was called. 2 cadets Jake did not know well entered the arena from opposite sides. They fought with plasma blades moving in a blur of light and motion. The match lasted 4 minutes before one cadet scored 3 touches on his opponent's torso, triggering the arena's automated scoring system. The winner raised his blade in triumph while medical drones rushed to treat the loser's burns. Match after match played out. Jake watched carefully, analyzing fighting styles and weapon choices. The energy weapons were fast and powerful, but they had predictable patterns. Plasma attacks traveled in straight lines. Force hammers had wind-up times before strikes. Even the monomolecular blades, dangerous as they were, followed the physical limits of the beings wielding them. Clix's match came before Jake's. The Virex fought using twin energy daggers, moving with the incredible speed of his species. His opponent was a Zanari, a telepathic species with pale blue skin. The Zanari tried to use mental attacks to disorient Clix, but the Vrex had trained against such tactics. He closed the distance in a blur and scored touches so fast the crowd gasped. The match was over in 90 seconds. Clix returned to the staging area, his compound eyes finding Jake. "I will face you in the second round if you survive Vorn," he said. "Fight well, roommate." "You too," Jake replied. Then the announcement echoed through the arena. Next match, Vorn of Kragnoth versus Jake Morrison of Earth. Jake stood unwrapping his crossbow as he walked toward the arena entrance. Behind him he heard murmurs of confusion and then laughter. He ignored it, focusing on his breathing, on the weapon in his hands, on everything Lisa Grant had taught him about staying calm under pressure. The arena floor felt different under his boots when he was the one fighting. Vorn was already there, standing in the center like a mountain of muscle and armor. His powered exoskeleton hummed with energy, and his force hammer rested on his shoulder. Through his helmet speakers, his voice boomed across the arena. "What is that toy you carry, human?" Vorn laughed, and the crowd joined in. "Did you bring a stick to fight me?" Jake said nothing. He walked to his starting position, the crossbow held loosely in his hands. Above him, the holographic display zoomed in on his weapon. The announcers were struggling to identify it. In the judge's box, Chief Instructor Zalthor leaned forward. Jake saw him pull up a datapad and start scrolling through information. The crowd's laughter was dying down, replaced by confused muttering. Jake loaded a bolt into the crossbow. The action was smooth from weeks of practice. He cranked the mechanical lever, drawing back the string until it locked in place. The crossbow was now under more than 1,000 pounds of tension, all of it waiting to be released. Zalthor stood suddenly, his mouth opening as if to object. Then he stopped, reading something on his datapad. Jake saw the moment of realization cross the instructor's reptilian face. The crossbow was not technically a projectile weapon by the definition given. It used no chemical propellants, no electromagnetic fields, no compressed gas. It was purely mechanical, storing energy in bent materials and releasing it through a simple trigger mechanism. Zalthor slowly sat back down. His expression was unreadable, but he made no move to stop the match. The arena's automated system began the countdown. Combat begins in 3, 2, 1, engage. Vorn charged immediately, his powered armor making the floor shake with each step. His force hammer swung up, ready to crush Jake with a single blow. His energy shields glowed around his body, calibrated to absorb plasma attacks and deflect energy weapons. He had faced dozens of opponents and defeated them all with overwhelming power. Jake stood his ground. He raised the crossbow, sighting down the simple mechanical sights. Vorn was 30 feet away, then 20. The Kragnoth was moving fast for his size, but compared to the speed of an energy bolt, he was slow. Jake had all the time in the world. He aimed not at Vorn's center mass, where the armor was thickest, but at the small box on the Kragnoth's right hip. The shield generator. Every cadet learned to protect their generators, but they trained against enemies using energy weapons. Weapons that gave away their targeting with charge-up lights and aimed lasers. The crossbow had no such warnings. It was silent and mechanical. Jake pulled the trigger. The string snapped forward with a crack that echoed through the suddenly silent arena. The bolt left the crossbow at over 400 feet per second. A blur of metal and composite materials. It crossed the distance to Vorn in a fraction of a second. The Kragnoth's shields flickered as they detected an incoming object, but they were calibrated for energy attacks for plasma and lasers. The protocols for handling solid projectiles at high velocity did not exist in their programming, because no modern warrior used such things. The bolt punched through the shields as if they were not there. It struck the shield generator with a solid thunk, and sparks erupted from the device. Vorn's shields died instantly, flickering out of existence. The Kragnoth stumbled, shocked by the sudden loss of his primary defense. But Jake was not done. He had already cranked the crossbow again, loading a second bolt. The entire reload process took 4 seconds. Vorn was still stumbling, trying to understand what had happened. Jake aimed at the Kragnoth's left shoulder joint, where the powered armor's plates connected with a gap for mobility. The second bolt flew. This one struck exactly where Jake intended, punching through the gap and embedding itself in the joint mechanism. Vorn's left arm went dead, the powered exoskeleton losing control. His massive force hammer slipped from his grip and crashed to the floor. The arena was completely silent now. Every eye was on the human holding an ancient weapon, and the mighty Kragnoth warrior who was stumbling backward in shock and pain. Jake loaded a third bolt, but the arena's automated system was already making its announcement. Critical damage detected. Match suspended. Medical intervention required. Winner, Jake Morrison of Earth. The silence broke. Half the crowd erupted in outrage, shouting about human trickery and unfair advantages. The other half was cheering, amazed at what they had just witnessed. Medical drones swarmed around Vorn, treating his wounds. The Kragnoth was not seriously hurt, but his pride was wounded deeper than any bolt could reach. Jake lowered the crossbow and walked off the arena floor. His hands were shaking now, adrenaline flooding his system. He had done it. He had won his first match using a weapon from Earth's medieval past against an... Jake spent the evening before his match against Clix reviewing everything he knew about Vrek's physiology and combat patterns. The data was not encouraging. Vreks had reaction times 4 times faster than humans. Their compound eyes could track movement in nearly all directions simultaneously. They could accelerate from standing still to full speed in less than a second. Clix was not just fast, he was trained, disciplined, and now he knew about the crossbow. In their shared room, Clix watched Jake cleaning the crossbow for the 3rd time. The Vrex's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "You know I will not go easy on you tomorrow," Clix said. "I would not want you to," Jake replied. "That would dishonor both of us. You have thought about how to fight me." Again, not a question, Jake smiled. "Have you thought about how to fight this?" He held up the crossbow. "I have thought of little else. Your weapon is devastating against opponents who do not expect it, but I have watched the recording of your match with Vorn a dozen times. I have measured the time it takes you to reload. 4.2 seconds on average. In that time I can cross 50 meters, so you'll rush me. Close the distance before I can reload." Clix's mandibles spread in what might have been a grin. "Perhaps. Or perhaps I will make you think I will rush, then do something else. We have lived together for weeks, Jake. I know how you think. You know how I think. Tomorrow will be interesting." Jake could not argue with that. He set the crossbow aside and pulled up tactical simulations on his datapad, running through scenarios over and over. Every plan he made seemed to have a counter. The crossbow's advantages against Vorn became disadvantages against a fast, smart opponent who knew what to expect. The next morning, Jake entered the arena with butterflies in his stomach. The crowd was much larger than the previous day. Word had spread about the human with the ancient weapon. Holographic displays showed his match with Vorn on repeat. Analysts from different species discussing the implications. The commentators could not decide if Jake was a tactical genius or simply lucky. The bracket had narrowed from 48 competitors to 24. Jake was the lowest seed remaining, but he had earned a measure of respect. When he walked through the competitors' tunnel, other cadets nodded to him. Not friendship, but acknowledgement. He was not just the primitive human anymore. Clix was already in the arena when Jake emerged. The Vreks held his twin energy daggers, their blades shimmering with contained power. His forearms moved in a flowing warm-up routine, and his compound eyes tracked Jake's every movement. Chief Instructor Zalthor's voice boomed across the arena. Second match of round 2. Clix of Vreks versus Jake Morrison of Earth. Competitors, take your positions. Jake walked to his starting mark, loading a bolt into the crossbow as he went. The familiar motion calmed his nerves. Around the arena, the crowd settled into expectant silence. This match had generated enormous interest. The roommates, forced together by academy assignment, now facing each other in combat. The countdown began. Jake took a deep breath, his mind clear and focused. He had made his decision about how to fight this match. It was risky, maybe even foolish, but it was the only strategy he could think of that might work. Engage. Clix moved. Not forward in a rush, but sideways, circling at incredible speed. He was testing Jake's ability to track him, looking for gaps in human reaction time. Jake turned to follow, the crossbow aimed but not firing. The bolt was precious. He could not waste it. The Vrek suddenly changed direction, darting in at an angle. Jake swung the crossbow to track him and pulled the trigger. The bolt flew, but Clix had already changed direction again. The projectile passed through empty air and embedded itself in the arena wall with a solid thunk. One shot, wasted. Clix's mandibles clicked in what might have been laughter. Jake dropped to one knee and began cranking the reload mechanism. 4 seconds. He was completely vulnerable. Clix charged in, energy daggers raised. But Jake had anticipated this. He was not trying to reload. He was baiting. At 3 seconds, Jake suddenly rolled sideways, abandoning the crossbow. His hand went to his belt, where he had a backup weapon every cadet carried. A simple energy pistol, standard academy issue. Jake fired 3 shots as he rolled. They were not aimed to kill or even seriously wound. They were aimed at Clix's feet, at the floor around the Vreks. The energy blast scorched the metal, forcing Clix to dodge to slow his charge. It bought Jake the seconds he needed. He came up with the crossbow reloaded, but instead of aiming at Clix, he aimed at the far wall of the arena. He fired. The bolt struck a control panel for the arena's environmental systems. Sparks flew, and suddenly the lighting changed. The bright overhead lights dimmed. replaced by flickering emergency lighting that cast moving shadows across the floor. The crowd gasped. Clix froze for a moment, his compound eyes struggling to adapt to the sudden change in light levels. Those eyes were adapted for the steady light of Vrek's home worlds. Rapid changes in illumination confused them. Jake did not freeze. He had grown up on Earth, where day became night became day, where humans hunted in dawn and dusk. In the times when light was uncertain, he moved not to attack but to reposition, keeping the light sources between him and Clix. The Vreks recovered quickly. He was trained and disciplined, but now he was cautious, unable to track Jake as easily in the irregular lighting. He moved slower, more carefully. Jake used that caution. He reloaded in the shadows, then emerged from a different angle. Clix spun to face him, but Jake was not aiming at the Vreks. He was aiming at the floor between them. He fired, and the bolt struck the metal with a shower of sparks. Clix jumped back instinctively. It was a feint, designed to make Clix move in a predictable direction. Jake had already drawn his energy pistol again.
He fired not at Clix but at another control panel.
This one managed the arena's gravity systems. The gravity did not fail completely, but it fluctuated, dropping to half-Earth normal for a few seconds before the backup system stabilized it. In those seconds, Jake launched himself forward in a low jump that carried him much farther than Clix expected. He tucked and rolled, coming up with the crossbow reloaded again. This time he was close, too close for Clix to dodge easily. The Vreks brought his energy daggers up to deflect, but Jake had learned from watching other matches. The daggers could cut through the crossbow bolts if Clix could see them coming and react in time. So Jake did not aim at Clix's body. He aimed at the Vreks' legs, at the joint where chitin plates met softer tissue. Clix tried to dodge, but in the fluctuating gravity, his incredible speed worked against him. He moved too fast and could not quite control his trajectory. The bolt caught him in the left rear leg, not deeply but enough to draw a mark from the arena's automated scoring system. One touch for Jake. The crowd roared. Nobody had expected the human to score first against Clix. The Vreks' mandibles spread in what Jake had learned was a Vreks expression of approval. Well fought, human. You use your environment as a weapon. I did not expect this. Humans are tool users, Jake said, already reloading. Everything is a potential tool. Clix nodded and then moved again, but this time with a different pattern. He had learned Jake's tactics and was adapting. He kept distance, forcing Jake to choose between using the crossbow or the energy pistol. He moved erratically, making shots difficult. And he stayed away from the control panels, denying Jake the chance to manipulate the environment further. The match became a game of patience and positioning. Jake could not get a clean shot with the crossbow. Clix could not close the distance without exposing himself to attack. They circled each other, each waiting for the other to make a mistake. Then Clix did something unexpected. He threw one of his energy daggers at Jake. It was not a killing throw, but a distraction. Jake dodged, and in that moment Clix charged from a different angle. The Vreks was on him before Jake could bring the crossbow to bear. The energy dagger in Clix's remaining hand slashed forward. Jake blocked with the crossbow stock, and the blade cut into the wood and composite material. Clix tried to pull back, but his blade was stuck for just a moment. Jake used that moment to thrust forward with the crossbow, using it like a staff to strike Clix in the thorax. The impact scored a second touch for Jake, but Clix's blade had cut deep into the crossbow. When they separated, Jake saw the damage. The weapon was not broken, but the string had been nicked. It might fail at any moment. Both fighters backed away, reassessing. Clix had lost his thrown dagger but still had one weapon. Jake had a damaged crossbow and his energy pistol. Both had scored touches, but Jake was ahead on points. Chief Instructor Zalthor's voice echoed across the arena. 5 minutes remaining in regulation time. Jake made a decision. The crossbow had done its job, proven its worth. But a smart fighter knew when to adapt. He set the crossbow down carefully and drew his energy pistol. It was not the weapon he had been winning with, but it was what the situation demanded. Clix saw the gesture and understood. Jake was acknowledging that the Vreks had forced him to change tactics. It was a sign of respect. Clix's mandibles clicked rapidly and he retrieved his thrown dagger. The final 5 minutes became a different kind of fight. Jake used the pistol, aiming for touches rather than trying to overwhelm Clix with firepower. The Vreks used his speed and blades, looking for openings. The 3 days before the semi-final match passed in a blur of preparation and growing attention. Jake had become something of a celebrity at the academy. Cadets from species he had never spoken to before approached him to discuss tactics and ask about human warfare history. Instructors who had previously ignored him now stopped to watch his training sessions. The crossbow was the talk of every mess hall conversation. Jake used the time to repair his equipment and study his next opponent. The bracket had placed him against Zeph, the Thorian who could manipulate plasma naturally. Jake had watched all of Zeph's matches. The Thorian was fast, aggressive, and his plasma attacks could overwhelm shields and armor with sustained heat. More concerning, Zeph had clearly been studying Jake's matches too. The Thorian would not be caught off guard like Vorn had been. On the second day, Jake received a message to report to Chief Instructor Zalthor's office. He had never been summoned there before, and he walked through the academy corridors wondering if he was in trouble. Maybe someone had filed a complaint about the crossbow. Maybe the rules were being changed. Zalthor's office was sparse and functional, decorated with weapons from a dozen different worlds. The Draconis instructor sat behind a desk that seemed too small for his massive frame. He gestured for Jake to sit. "Cadet Morrison," Zalthor began, "you have caused quite a disturbance in this academy." Jake's stomach sank. "Sir, if there's a problem with my weapon choice, I can explain." Zalthor's mouth opened in that unsettling smile. "There is no problem with your weapon. I checked the regulations personally 3 times, as I said before. You found a loophole that has existed in our rules for over 2,000 years. No species thought to exploit it, because no species remembered that projectile weapons could exist without chemical propellants or electromagnetic acceleration. Then what is this about, sir? You have reminded this academy of something important. We train warriors to use modern technology, to fight modern battles. But in doing so, we have forgotten the fundamentals of warfare. Strategy, adaptation, creative thinking. These things matter more than the sophistication of your weapons." Zalthor leaned forward. "Tell me, human, do you believe you can win this tournament?" Jake considered the question carefully. "I have a chance, sir. But the competition gets harder with each round. Zeph is faster and more experienced than me. If I reach the finals, I'll face either Krath or the Zanari fighter, both of whom are incredibly skilled. You are honest about your limitations. Good. But you underestimate one thing. Your greatest weapon is not that crossbow. It is your species' history of warfare. Humans fought wars for thousands of years before reaching the stars. You have forgotten more about combat than most species ever learned. I'm just one human, sir. I don't know everything about our military history. No, but you know how to learn, how to research, how to adapt old solutions to new problems." Zalthor stood and walked to his wall of weapons. He pulled down a blade that looked like it was made from black glass. "This is from my homeworld, from before we developed energy weapons. My ancestors fought with blades like this for 10,000 years. Then we discovered plasma technology and forgot everything about fighting with simple tools." He handed the blade to Jake. It was surprisingly light and perfectly balanced. Maybe we should not have forgotten so quickly. Maybe there is wisdom in remembering where we came from. Jake handed the blade back. "Sir, why are you telling me this?" "Because win or lose, you have already accomplished something important. You have shown this academy that innovation comes from unexpected places, that newer is not always better, that a warrior with a 1,000-year-old weapon and a clever mind can defeat enemies with superior technology." Zalthor returned the blade to its place on the wall. "Now go prepare for your match. And remember, you represent more than yourself. You represent every human who ever picked up a weapon to defend their people." The semi-final matches were scheduled for the same day, one after the other. Jake's match with Zeph would be first, followed by Krath against the Zanari fighter whose name Jake had learned was Syl. The winner of each match would face off in the finals 2 days later. The arena was packed beyond capacity. Beings stood in the aisles unable to find seats. The holographic displays showed that the tournament was being broadcast to other academies across the galaxy. Jake Morrison, the human with the medieval weapon, had captured imaginations across dozens of worlds. Jake walked onto the arena floor carrying his repaired crossbow and his backup equipment. He had spent hours deciding on his strategy for this match. Zeph would not charge blindly like Vorn. He would not circle predictably like Clix had initially tried. The Thorian was smart and patient, willing to wait for the perfect moment to strike. Zeph entered from the opposite side, his skin already glowing with contained plasma energy. He looked like a humanoid made of flowing lava, beautiful and terrifying. He carried no weapon because he did not need one. His body was the weapon capable of generating and projecting plasma at will. Human Jake. Zeph called across the arena. I have studied your tactics. Your crossbow is effective, but it has limitations. Reload time. Limited ammunition. Predictable ballistics. I will not give you easy targets, I know, Jake called back. I've studied you too. Your plasma is powerful, but it drains your energy reserves. Sustained combat weakens you. You need to end fights quickly. Zeph's glow intensified. Then let us see who has prepared better. The countdown began. Jake loaded a bolt and took a deep breath. This was it. Win here, and he would reach the finals. Lose and his tournament run ended. Engage. Zeph moved immediately, but not toward Jake. The Thorian ran laterally, building up heat as he moved. His body temperature was rising, visible as a distortion in the air around him. He was charging up for a massive plasma attack, something that could hit Jake from long range. Jake did not give him that chance. He fired the crossbow at Zeph's feet, not trying to hit the Thorian but to disrupt his movement. The bolt struck the metal floor and ricocheted unpredictably. Zeph had to dodge, breaking his concentration on the plasma buildup. But Zeph adapted quickly. He stopped trying to charge a large attack and instead fired smaller plasma bolts from his hands. They came in rapid succession, forcing Jake to dodge and roll. The floor where Jake had been standing a moment before was scorched and smoking. Jake took cover behind one of the arena's obstacle structures, a metal barrier designed to make matches more tactical. He reloaded the crossbow while Zeph's plasma bolts hammered the barrier. The metal was heating up, beginning to glow red. In seconds, it would be too hot to hide behind. Jake made a decision. Instead of firing the crossbow over the barrier at Zeph, he fired it at the barrier itself. The bolt struck the metal and Jake's aim was perfect. The bolt hit a structural weak point, and the overheated barrier collapsed, falling toward Zeph. The Thorian had to jump back to avoid being crushed by the falling metal. In that moment of distraction, Jake charged forward. Not to fire the crossbow, but to close distance. He drew his energy pistol and fired while running, not aiming carefully but laying down suppressive fire. Zeph returned fire with plasma. The exchange lit up the arena like a thunderstorm. Jake felt a plasma bolt graze his left arm, searing through his uniform and burning his skin. The pain was intense, but he did not stop moving. He rolled behind another barrier, breathing hard. The automated scoring system registered the touch on Jake's arm. Zeph had scored first. The crowd roared, but Jake had gained ground. He was now close enough that Zeph's long-range advantages were reduced. At this distance, the crossbow's reload time mattered less, because Zeph could not build up for massive attacks without Jake interrupting him. Jake reloaded quickly and stepped out from cover. Zeph was ready, firing a plasma bolt at Jake's position, but Jake had anticipated this. He dropped prone and fired the crossbow from ground level. The bolt flew under Zeph's plasma attack and struck the Thorian in the leg. The automated system registered the touch. 1 score each. The crowd's roar intensified. Zeph's glow dimmed slightly. He was expending energy rapidly, burning through his reserves. Jake could see it in the way the Thorian moved, slightly slower than before. The strategy was working. Make Zeph use his power, drain him, then capitalize on his weakness. But Zeph understood the strategy too. He stopped using large plasma attacks and switched to defensive tactics. He created a plasma shield around himself, a shimmering barrier of heat that would incinerate anything that touched it. The crossbow bolts would burn up before reaching him. Jake had prepared for this possibility. He set the crossbow down and pulled out something he had requisitioned from his Earth shipment. A simple metal cylinder with a pin at one end. The instructors who had approved his equipment request had not recognized it, but any human soldier would have known it immediately. A flashbang grenade. Designed in the 20th century to disorient enemies without causing lethal harm, it used a small explosive charge to create a blinding flash and deafening sound. The technology was old, but it was not a projectile weapon by the tournament's definition. It was an area effect device. Jake pulled the pin and threw the grenade over Zeph's plasma shield. The Thorian saw it coming, but did not understand what it was. The grenade hit the ground near Zeph's feet and detonated.